Oh no, just no sound from me. That's fine. I introduced everyone and it wasn't recorded because I was muted. Wonderful. So everyone say hello to the crew. Ramona, Sharon,
Hello.
Matthias, and Darach.
Hello.
So, questions, dear chat. It was. Mm-hmm.
Puns, memes.
Yeah. Let's flip this around. If the chat doesn't want to ask us questions, let's ask the chat a question. Tremor or tremors? What is the correct pronunciation?
For Ben, the correct pronunciation is tremors. It's
Yep.
always plural. Here's a question from the cynical Chris in Twitch chat. When is Tremor going to be rewritten in Java 8 to solve a disturbing lack of null pointer exception errors?
We are actually working actively on that. Yeah. Yeah.
In Java 5, JDK 5, the null pointer exceptions are longer.
Nice. That's what we need.
It seems Matthias is not being heard, says Anna. Let's find out why. I don't know. This is hard. I hear you.
Could be some of the routing magic, Heinz, is not as magical as it was yesterday when we tested this.
I hear Darach, that's for sure.
Technology is always great and it never causes any problems.
That's fair. Could be Matthias is just relatively quiet.
Yep.
Are you closer to the microphone now? Because I can hear you.
Yeah. Is it just Matthias that you folks can't hear? Ah.
Interesting. Thank you, Anna and Mariana, for the pointers. Because we totally can't tell. In our part of the internet voice audio streaming bubble, it's all fine.
Yep.
So interestingly, on the JVM front, we do actually have some code written in Clojure primarily by Heinz, which is using Jepsen to test the Raft consensus mechanism in the up-and-coming clustering release, which Matthias has been working on recently. So yeah, we like Clojure. Clojure is cool. We like it because we like Jepsen. Jepsen is evil.
Jepsen is good evil.
Evil in a good way.
Yeah. Actually, the whole story about Raft is fairly interesting. There is a we started initially with TyKV's Raft implementation, and in the end we decided to move to OpenRaft, which is a fork of async Raft, which is very actively maintained and works with async Raft, which is async Rust, which is really cool. Minus the little pains.
Yeah, if you're curious and looking at this closure code, it's the tremor.jepson repo on GitHub. It's part of the Tremor RS organization. Have a look. Make those tests more evil and send us a pull request. It is Oktoberfest after all.
Yep.
Yeah, the issue with Paxos, Anna, who said, I'm surprised you didn't use FX Paxos, as well, which Paxos? There are so many variants. I think Raft was a sensible, kind of wise choice, as there's only one variant to my knowledge. So it's easier for folk to pick up. And it was really designed with ease of implementation and learning in mind. So I think Diego Ongaro et al. Did a really good job on Raft.
Yeah, I believe the main reason why Raft even exists is because nobody could understand Paxos, so they decided to create something
That's not
that
fair.
people
At least
can
one
understand.
person understands Paxos, because that person came up with Paxos in most of its variants. But I think that the variation and speciation of Paxos is problematic for interoperability purposes. So Raft is a more modern and saner attempt at consensus. And I hope never to look at Paxos again. I still have the scars from the last time I had to look at it.
Not yet, Matthias.
Oh,
not
yes, Anna, thank you for any test suggestions you have. The more evil, the merrier. We would like to add more tests. Using more and diverse frameworks. So there's Jepson that we're already started using. L is another framework that we have yet to look into. There's probably others that we should be throwing into the mix as we move into clustering. If you do know of a framework we haven't looked at yet, drop us a line and we're happy to take a look. You can't have too many angles to look at a distributed system, because you always get the biggest, gnarliest bugs from the angles you forgot to look into. That's where the big bugs are always hiding.
We really want to use the RDTs. But they are honestly more interesting once you go into eventual consistency and not strict consistency like Raft. That's where they start to shine. Perhaps one day. And perhaps. Any other questions from the chat?
Yes, ask us questions, even if they are about Java. But ideally not.
Do you have any questions? Oh, there is one.
Who wants to introduce this question?
I'll read
Ramona,
it.
you introduce this question.
Okay.
Go on.
You go.
Matthias, maybe your sound is back to working. So the answer is maybe someday, who knows? Pony is nice, but
I got to read
yeah,
the question. This is recorded. People won't see the chat. The
Okay,
question
sorry.
is, so when are we rewriting Tremor in Pony?
Now that it's widely popular. Well, I don't know.
That's
I hope
definitely a
someday,
question for
but
Matthias.
I can't make any promises.
Once
But
we are
I
done
hope
with
we
the
will.
Yeah, once we are done with the Java rewrite, next one is going to be Pony.
Funnily enough, I think certain things in the Pony language will actually make writing Tremor a heck of a lot easier compared to Rustlang. The first, I think, is causal connections in Pony, allowing you to make a call on a behavior and then to chain that call in causal order is a super awesome enabling trait in Pony that allows you to compose deterministic sequences of actions that you don't have in Rust, and you certainly don't have in Erlang, for those familiar with actor programming with Erlang. If you have two events that can occur at the same time, writing a program or a state machine in Erlang you'll have to deal with the first event arriving first and or the second event arriving first, and vice versa, for your program to be considered correct. You don't have to do this in Pony, which I think makes Pony very interesting. The other thing is that structural typing. So traits in Pony are super simple. They sort of just work magically. If you write an actor of a certain shape, it sort of just works as a trait, given how Pony is implemented. And I think that would make some of the work that Romana is about to do with the command connector RFC, where we're thinking of trading out a lot of the connector implementations. So let's say you want to contribute a connector to Tremor, and it may or may not use transport level security or mutual TLS. With traits, we would be able to implement that once, and you could inherit and reuse it in the context of your connector. And you could reuse other parts that have been written for you. That's quite hard today with Rustlang, and I think it would be relatively easy with Pony. I'd be more interested though what Matthias thinks.
Yeah, let's actually go away from the joke question to a real one, because we have 2 or 1.5, because they kind of go into each other. Mariana was asking what's the roadmap and if there is planning for the possibility of dynamically deploying pipelines. Matthias, you're working on that right now. You want to chat about it? Can you hear Matthias now? Say a word. Not Matthias.
Anna, Mariana, can you hear Matthias?
Ah, damn it. I don't know why Matthias is the only one that can't be heard.
This is super odd.
It is super odd because he's literally set up the same way as everyone else.
Okay, Matthias, why don't you tell us, and then we will try and relay it to everyone, which is super odd, but let's see if it works.
We are extending our connectivity to GCP.
Said Matthias.
Said Matthias.
Speaking of roadmaps, we think about special placement strategies, like you define one pipeline and it's actually running on the whole cluster and utilizing all the parallel processing power, for example.
Okay, so that was quite a lot of talking there.
Awesome.
Matthias.
The audio is fixed.
Yes.
I found the magic button.
Awesome.
So Matthias can just go
Yes.
ahead now.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
You may
Oh,
repeat, Matthias, it saves us remembering.
It's clustering. So it's basically the current configuration, the current loaded apps, and the current cluster members is all based inside the cluster state and shared across all the nodes. And like what you do is you deploy applications and they get spawned on each Tremor node. You can auto scale up and down. That's the thing. Awesome. That's clustering first parts. Speaking of roadmap, there are the cool parts coming up, and this is basically having special placements. For example, put a Kafka consumer on every node and put all the messages into one big pipeline that is spawned across the whole a whole cluster and using all the parallel processing power and doing grouping, and like this opens the so much potential. It's like we go more into the big data stream processing engines or stuff like this. So this is the clustering roadmap. We still have Mario's plugin development kit to introduce. This is also on our plate. We are working continuously, adding more connectors towards Google, GCP, like Google Cloud Logging, GCS. We are improving the connectors concept in general by allowing to be more to adding command-based connectors, so you can actually dynamically say, I want to subscribe to this topic now, and you get all the messages from this topic. And so adding more dynamicity here. And yes, that's roadmap-wise.
Yeah, I think the main component, the main element in the roadmap are there's a major activity or stream of work, which is clustering, and that'll be a multi-release activity.
Yeah.
And there are the day-to-day updates and kind of maintenance stream of work where we're adding connectors and keeping up with a lot of the dependencies and libraries moving under our feet and Rust moving under our feet. So there's two basic parallel streams with Tremor today. There wasn't a year ago. We had a single stream. But as we grow, we've broken that into two active streams. So the first release of clustering will basically move a Tremor application from being something that runs on a single node and isn't aware of its neighbors to something that runs in the context of a cluster and is aware of its neighbors. But you won't have very fine grains of flexibility with this distributed application deployment and building environment in the initial clustering release. More flexibility will come later. So placement drivers and placement algorithms will allow you much more flexible routing in later editions of clustering. Also, we hope to add automatic kind of load and work set migration in later releases of clustering. These are already features within clustering we've discussed with various production users, but we're going to start with the basics that I think 80% are going to get the most value from. And we think the simple ability to be able to auto-scale is going to be useful to everyone, and that's the best place to start. Funnily enough, scaling up isn't really where we're thinking in terms of the auto-scaling facility. We're looking at scaling down. So we have some environments that are deployed on, say, 3 nodes, but they're not very active in production. And for those users, it'd be nice if they could scale down to 1 node when they're really working with low volume and they're working with non-critical environments, non-critical payloads. But they do need burstability. So auto-scaling is a great use case, and that'll be likely where Tremor will move initially with it. Hopefully that answers the question, Mariana. Ping in the chat if it doesn't.
There was another question about the ability to deploy pipelines dynamically. So speaking of 0.12 and 0.13 being released soonish, the only thing you can deploy right now is a flow that includes connectors, and pipelines and the connections thereof between them. So you cannot manipulate the queue and flow and insert a pipeline in between 2 connectors or like change the pipeline right now. So if I understand dynamically like this, it's not possible. It has been possible to add in 0.11 to add more bindings and add more Tremor YAMLs and start up other configs, but this is not possible anymore. With introducing clustering, possibly 0.13, 0.14 or 0.15, there will be the possibility to have multiple flows running and deploy them dynamically at runtime. But and we are looking into basically reconfiguring them and reloading, and but we need to see how far this goes.
Okay, the next question is, what largest implementation that you all know of? I'm thinking of implementing it in the near future in a largest hosting company in Poland. I'm not going to pronounce the name since I can't.
Nazwa.pl.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon.
And I'm wondering, how will it fare in this type of environment? Currently, even Nagios sometimes struggles with the amount of services and machines. The interesting question. I think the
Yeah,
largest
and that's
one-
awesome. We hope you do adopt it, and we're here to help if you do.
Yeah, the largest one is probably Wayfair that we know of.
I'd imagine it's our logging pipeline at Wayfair. We can't actually give out the numbers, but it's well into the petascale on a weekly basis, and it's extremely large numbers of terabytes shipped on a daily basis. Particularly during Cyber 5, where most e-commerces, and Wayfair is no different here, have their peak around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Those 5 days are the largest business trading period in the year. And Tremors really was originally designed for this purpose. And it started with traffic shaping. So we actually started solving non-functional requirements. So Tremor has always kept a very strong interest in providing first grade means for people to control back pressure, to manage systems that at scale during peak trading periods are never as robust as we want them to be. And Tremor deals with those realities very, very elegantly and very deliberately. Whereas most event processing systems work with data that's off the critical path. You might find these running analytics or part of your fast data or big data systems, but they're typically not on the business critical path like Tremor is. We're plugged into the fire hose, and that means we spend a lot of time obsessing on quality of service and those mechanisms inside the event processing engine. And that makes it really, really nice for SREs and operators, DevRel style folk. It's an event processing engine really designed for SREs and DevRels to go in and make fast changes to running systems that deal with a high volumetric inflow of data. Probably the most elegant solution implemented with Tremor of significant size, I'd point at Ender's solution. We've had a number of reviews and walkthroughs of Ender's code base. I think he probably has the most modern code base implemented in Tremor. And by that, I mean folk using Tremor for 4 years are probably using a coding style that is sort of going out of fashion as Tremor keeps evolving. But Ender, as a fairly recent set of production applications, is using a much later cut of the languages and the facilities inside Tremor. So Ender's is a great example code base of how to modularize things well and how to build and architect systems elegantly with Tremor. So I think Ender could give probably 10 talks on, or tutorials and training even, on how to architect critical systems with Tremor. Hopefully he gave a good overview of that, and an overview of the complexity of flows that he's dealing with in his organization's work that happens to be in the logging sector or in the observability domain. But there are other applications. So we see Tremor in the search domain. We recently have a use case of Tremor in the fraud domain, so in the payments kind of fintech environment. And we're starting to work with fast data and kind of real-time machine learning analytics data at work. So most of us on the Tremor kind of core maintainers team work inside Wayfair. Not all of us. Sharon leads our docs and tells us what to do. It doesn't work inside Wayfair, but yeah, we're seeing a lot of analytics workloads starting to become interesting for Tremor. I think the other thing of interest, and this was touched upon by Mariano, not only is dynamic deployment becoming important, but stateful applications are becoming hugely important with Tremor. So people wanting to write stateful distributed applications is where we are doing a lot of work and a lot of thinking, and there's a lot of work to come. Traditionally, so 3 to 4 years ago, Chris, a lot of the use cases would have been stateless. But as Tremor matures, stateful applications and stateful real-time processing are becoming much more important to our day-to-day and are starting to impact the roadmap a lot more heavily. So great set of questions there.
We're saying that Tremor is not directly comparable to Nagios since we do not have a storage element in it. So you can plug in Tremor as a intermediary and then store your data in whatever you choose, really. You could probably even forward it to Nagios. And it works quite different where, when I remember correct, it has been years since I used it, so I might remember wrong. Nagios is more a periodic check on issues kind of deployment. Tremor would be a more analyze the live data feed and flag an issue. So kind of different trade-offs.
Yeah, so I think that's a good summary. We don't do the storage. We tend to lean on and depend on connecting with storage environments like ClickHouse or BigQuery, where storage would occur with Tremor. So the real-time processing is where we're strong. We tend to partner with other environments and storage solutions where storage is concerned. These things should be really, really easy to integrate, having said this. So I don't think it's something we would discourage in principle, but definitely reach out and talk to us if you're considering moving in this direction, so that we can kind of know where you're headed, and we can let you know where Tremor is strong, where it's okay, and where there be dragons.
Interestingly
It always
a few months back, we did a little collaborative demo with the folks from TD Engine. They are doing a metrics store on pretty much the topic of metrics alerting. It is on our blog and on their blog. While we keep yabbering on here, I'll put the link to that in chat, and we'll try to remember.
Yeah, the
putting it in
TD
video
Engine
description.
folk are
Yeah.
extremely approachable and very nice to work with. So that's another storage environment that's definitely worth looking into and considering if you're thinking in this direction. We think Tremor and TD Engine would work quite well.
Yeah.
Tremor and TS would work quite well. There's lots of choice, depending on what type of infrastructure you prefer to deploy against in your environment.
This is the TD Engine example, and it comes with a Docker Compose and the whole shebang to try it out. Should be fairly easy to swap out elements, be it Tremor for whatever else you want, or TD Engine for whatever else you want. But it's a bit of a, well, one-click demo thingy. Any other questions? Silence. I guess that means no. So then I'll just put in a little plug here. We have Hacktoberfest issues in our repository. So if you want to have the shiny badges, which are non-NFTs and non-blockchain driven, which I was really happy to see about, that Hacktoberfest gives out, you can come by. We are easygoing on contributions.
And you can join our Discord, and we will be happy to help you and answer your questions.
One question just in from Mario, the long question, so he spent most of the time typing.
Yeah.
I'll read it out.
You'll read it this time. Go ahead.
Any plans on extending Tremor's capabilities with respect to session management in a similar fashion to Flink? You can create aggregates. Okay, so that's a great question.
Let's read the end of the question, so people that can't watch the
second half, and then we'll go into an answer. You can create aggregates and windows, but for example, I don't think you can arbitrarily end an aggregate given a specific event or condition. Okay, so to my knowledge, Flink supports 3 window processing styles. It supports tumbling windows, like Tremor does. It also supports sliding windows, and we would really like to add sliding windows into Tremor. We don't currently support them. It also supports something called a session style window, and I think that's what you're referring to, our session style windows in Flink. The way we're likely to approach this in Tremor, and you can look at the open RFCs, is the first is stateful windows. So being able to manage the state and manage the window mechanics yourself. The second are custom aggregates. So the ability to write your own aggregates in the high-level Tremor languages so that you can effectively roll your own window styles when building off of the internal mechanics that Tremor offers. So I don't think we will support session windows in the near term, and we probably won't support session windows directly using the same or similar semantics to Flink, nor would we be likely to support landmark style windows. which is sort of a slightly different again. But we hope to have the underlying mechanics and mechanisms through custom aggregates and stateful windows for you to be able to compose these types that are much more targeted at exactly the semantics that you want. Does that answer the question? So yeah, Tremor will likely approach this differently than Flink and the other engines, Mario. Another thing where Tremor is different is we support, at least for tumbling windows, we support the notion of a tilt frame. So imagine a succession of windows of differing resolution or granularity. So if you have streaming data that's streaming into your platform at fire hose resolution, so event resolution, and you might want to summarize that by the second, and you might want to summarize the seconds by the minute by the hour, and so on. This is trivial to compose inside Tremor. You can literally chain these windows together, and Tremor is clever enough to be able to merge the underlying memory from these mechanisms together without introducing summary error or amplification of summary error by aggregating those across distinct aggregates. So that's something that other event processing engines don't currently do. And I think in concert with some of we weren't clever enough to design this, but we did have production use case that were evil enough to force us to implement certain things, features in Tremor. For example, explicit control of cardinality is a feature that came out of pre-aggregation use cases in Tremor in the metrics domain within observability. And we have explicit control over outliers and explicit control of cardinalities inside Tremor. And those features are extremely useful for the few use cases that need them. So there's quite a lot of production value in the current implementation of Windows. We're hoping not to have 5 or 10 different window processing styles. We'd rather have 2, 3, or 4 core processing styles and to open up the flexibility to users to define and to modularize and store your own windows with the explicit semantics you need, share them across your production estate, across the production applications and algorithms.
You said the session windows are a requirement for your use case. Would script-driven windows, something, or state-driven windows, something we have been actively working on, just got distracted by other stuff, help you there? Basically, what they do is you define a script that returns either keep the window open or close the window and roll the next session based on the data that comes in and a state that you can keep. Would that solve your problem? That could definitely work, he says. Wonderful. Then we have an excuse to eventually work on that again.
And pop into the Discord and mess with that.
Yes, I'll throw in a link to the PR that we have on that, which never got finished.
Yeah, and there is a branch on that already.
Yeah, where you can play around.
Great question. Any other questions?
There you go.
Yes, the great thing about roadmaps is they keep getting bigger.
And change.
The problem with roadmaps is they keep getting bigger and they change.
So it's the pull request 1261 now's in the video, so the next person can look it up on the Tremor runtime repository. We should definitely, in hindsight, what we should have done is put a QR code in our video with a link to our chat. I think Mario had the QR codes in there.
Mario, you have the QR codes. You are a step ahead in video presentation trends.
We'll steal that for the next time.
Yeah. He's our influencer.
Yeah.
Yeah, influencer.
Copying his style.
Totally copying his style. The copyist that we can. Anything else? that people want
overlaying
to
the
know.
status beyond our capabilities. So to future readers of this on YouTube, we apologize for some of the things we're responding to. We haven't always called them out. Some of these are on the chat on Twitch, and that hasn't made it into this recording, for which our humblest apologies are forwarded.
To be
But we
fair,
hope you enjoy the rest of the content.
we also don't have space for it really in the setup. But perhaps next year, we just need fewer speakers or smaller faces.
Or bigger QR codes.
No, it was about overlaying the live chat. There is a way for that. I know it, but I don't know how to do that well.
I think if you want to do it well, you need to use Comic Sans.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's just one ingredient.
I thought only
another
Simon
thing-
Jones was allowed to use Comic Sans.
One other thing is talking about any UI, be it a terminal or a web-based UI. So if anyone was theoretically wanting to work on this, hit us up. We are super happy to provide any kind of API insights into the running Tremor that you would ever need. So if you want to go wild, doing TypeScript or whatever you want, some nice Rust terminal UI,
Yep.
we are here.
And for those that aren't currently on the Discord, if you do join our Discord, notice the code of conduct, and once you're through that, you will see all of the live channels once you've accepted.
Yeah.
Within the environment, we often hold meetings, debugging sessions, and we do live coding, especially when things are not going the right way, because more brains are always better than one. So all of that is in 2 voice channels within our Discord, one called Summer, one called Winter. They needed names, and Summer and Winter was better than one or 2. So feel free to join into those channels if you see folk in there. That's the whole point of communities. So you could stumble onto a design session for Tremor, and if you feel like getting involved, get involved. If you feel like lurking, it's okay to lurk too.
Yep.
There's, I don't know if you're out of time, but
We have one more question from Mario.
Yeah. Stickman is asking,
Yes.
in which ways is TremorCon trying to achieve more adoption, other than by adding more features?
For example,
One
conference.
example would be organizing a conference.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the more interesting things about adoption is that sometimes adoption lags the feature by up to a year or even 18 months. I mean, I don't actually remember when we added the state mechanism. It was quite a long time. Heinz, when was that? It was a long time ago.
I
It was
don't
before
even remember.
Matthias joined, wasn't it?
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, because Anoop added it. That was added 2.5 years ago. It's only in the past 6 months that people have noticed it and go, oh, this is really powerful. So sometimes the feature is there and the right use case find it at some point when a need around it arrives. It's odd because most of the features in Tremor actually came from production with potential adopters or existing adopters looking for new features. Like explicitly looking for and needing new features. So we're very careful about trying to avoid adding features where we can. Over time, features get added, but sometimes features get taken away. For example, our API surface has reduced in complexity. Thankfully, as the YAML in Tremor no longer exists, earlier in Tremor's history, we didn't have the bandwidth to add a deployment language or a query language. And now there's just one language with these kind of aspects or flavors to them, if you will. So we had to add a lot of infrastructure around YAML-based deployment, registry and repository services and API support. Those were removed in favor of a better language for describing those things. So sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back. So sometimes we have to take away some nice features, more flexible API, but to move forward to a better place. So for example, to enable clustering, we need the API to be kind of set up in a certain way. And to remove the YAML meant we could actually do a lot of technical debt cleanup that we had wanted to do for about 4 years, Heinz, before we got to it.
Yes, but let's be honest, all that technical stuff is largely irrelevant for adoption. And none of that will bring users to an open source project. And we are not great at marketing, as all of us are to a large degree technologists. But we are doing a number of things. Ramona mentioned it, we are organizing conferences like this. We are taking part in the CNCF mentorships, the CNCF/LFA mentorships, where, for example, we found Sharon and Mario and Prashant. We are collaborating with other projects like the TD Engine collaboration we mentioned earlier. So we are trying to do our best that we as a team of developers can. And the other thing is we encourage our users to talk about Tremor, because nothing we can possibly say will ever match up to a few words from a user.
Production experience is what matters.
And more impactful from that. That's one of the reasons why we were very happy to have some of our users, Ender and Ben, speak here today, which is really, really cool. So those use cases are a great way to get adoption, because no one adopts a project because the developers say, hey, it's great. Obviously, the developers say, hey, it's great. People adopt projects because they see others succeed. That's the number one reason. So that's where we are.
I mean, our marketing budget is $0 per month. We don't do any marketing beyond socializing the project and looking for genuine adopters. So it's great when kind of someone like Chris pops along this afternoon and says, hey, we're thinking of using Tremor. Would it be useful in this environment? That's the kind of user and the kind of adoption we're looking for. Because it's the best kind of adoption, someone who's going to put it in production, get some value from it, and hopefully deliver valuable feedback, and maybe at some point in the future contribute. So, I mean, look at Ender. Not only did he do a talk today, but he did 3 contributions yesterday as a Helm charts for Tremor, which are also open source. He's using those Helm charts in production and saw some opportunities to add some end-to-end testing at the CI and to add standard labels, which isn't something that those Helm charts had when they were originally written inside Wayfair a long, long time ago. So seeing external contributions actually adds a lot of value to those and means others benefit. So we're hoping all of the adopters of Tremor contribute in some way. And it can be via the CI, or it can be through writing code. Internet died.
No, something died.
Something on the internet died.
Something on the internet died. I think Twitch died.
Yeah, seems like Twitch is having a trouble.
We should probably not all click on reload on Twitch at once.
Nope.
I'll go for it.
Oh, there's Twitch is back. Yay, Twitch is back.
There may have been a Twitch that occurred in the Matrix. I think we're back.
One thing I assume we could do from a marketing perspective is advertise Tremor as a solution to problem X, right? We are guilty of like building Tremor in a generic way, and Tremor being a generic tool for lots of stream processing use cases, right? It's back pressure, it's validating input data, it's quality of service, it's routing, it's could be a feature store for machine learning, could be it's used as a transaction processing machine for ingesting search documents, could be used for somewhat. I think like what we could try out is, we should try out at some point, is advertising it as a solution to problem X, right? And
Yeah, the guides went a little into that direction, but they never grew beyond the basic guide and the metrics guide.
It's the typical issue of being a relatively small team, because a relatively finite amount of time, is where do we put the effort? Over time, we're hoping that as folk join the community, that effort is more distributed and that we're benefiting in more ways than we are today. So, for example, contributions that expand the standard library in Tremor, super useful because it makes someone else's adoption easier. We're always looking for ways to make Tremor easier to adopt. We don't always have the time to implement all the ideas that we come up with. If you do see something that you think you could be pretty strong at, or your organization could contribute as part of their adoption journey, we're an open project. You know where the Discord is, so pop in and join in is, I think, the best advice that we can give.
And the
Yeah, we
QR
would
code
love your
now,
help.
if you are not on Tremor chat, we plopped it in there at the edge.
Yes, and for those watching the video, the URL is chat.tremor.rs.
And the QR code. Just scan it and go there. Promise no viruses. Hopefully. Anyway, any more questions, or should we call it a day? Give the chat a moment or two.
There's about a 5-second lag in there.
I know. That's why I'm giving the chat a moment. Questions. Last chance for questions. Going once. Going
should
twice.
set up a GPT-3 bot that and feed the chat with with questions we are prepared to answer.
Yes.
Next time.
Yes, that's why Ramona read out the URL, so you can go there on your own without going to a QR code. Going twice. Questions.
Almost touching that QR code.
Yeah, a little bit to the other direction.
Don't touch it.
It's in the other direction to my brain. My brain's moving it the wrong. I give up.
Okay. Going
My camera
third
froze.
time.
Perfect. My camera froze.
Yeah, perfect. You're now frozen, and that's a
Yeah.
Okay, I have camera too.
that's a good moment to call it a day. So much thanks to all of our speakers. You all were absolutely awesome and great. And so much thanks to our guests, everyone who popped by, listened, learned, asked the questions. We really appreciate you being part of our community. And see you all on our Discord. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.